Time now for the equestrian panel. We'll just quickly get everybody set up. If you all want to come up, so Andrew McLean, Kazuma Tomoto, Amanda Ross, Jess Bott, and find some spots here, and I'll introduce you all. Andrew McLean, of course, we heard from earlier in the session, early this afternoon, the expert in equine learning and training and welfare science, as you heard, and some great ideas about thoroughbred psychology. We're going to hear again from Andrew. Kazuma Tomoto, Japanese Olympian in Tokyo, having competed in show jumping, then moved into eventing, and now training with William Fox Pitt to hopefully compete in next year's Paris Olympic Games. Amanda Ross, based here in Victoria. Amanda rode an off-the-track thoroughbred in the Sydney Olympic Games in the year 2000, was shortlisted to represent Australia in Tokyo, and is an ambassador for thoroughbreds away from racing for Racing Victoria. And Jess Bott. Jess has ridden many off-track thoroughbreds, comes from an equestrian background, but is very much involved with husband Adrian Bott and the Gay Waterhouse stable. And Jess initiated OAR, Owners After Racing, incentivising racing's owners to have an awareness of the care required for thoroughbreds when they finish racing. So Andrew, we might start with you, because that was so fascinating listening to you a little bit earlier on. We sort of touched on a lot of as I said, the physiology, the psychology of the thoroughbred, but how do the artificial aids actually affect the horse's mental security, which is obviously so important, and what can we do to help horses during and after their racing career? Sort of round it all out into one answer, and overall how it actually really affects the horses when you're really trying to get them into that transition from racing into a new home.
Well, I think it's like everything else, all the other aids as well, that it's important that they're really consistent. And if we give the horse a consistent early life in training and then again through racing as much as possible, it really helps them a lot. And I actually think that, contrary to a lot of opinion about this, is that riding horses and training them is actually good behaviour enrichment, and that includes racing. I think it's something that horses can do, and they seem to enjoy that, and there's no evidence to suggest that it's otherwise. But I think the important thing is that, as I said, to be consistent and to keep the rules the same. And if we use the artificial aids like the voice, and in equestrian terminology we refer to the body position as well, because that can signal horses to do things at a really high level. And a very sophisticated level. And again, we just need to teach people to do it well, and that's where good horse training and good coaching is really important, and it's often overlooked. When people are looking, if people don't know what they're talking about and are looking at horse training, they often don't recognise the real importance of having high-level coaches who know about how you sit on a horse, because every single movement you do on a horse when you're riding, if it's inconsistent with other aids you're using, such as the leg pressures or the reins, if it's inconsistent, then it can confuse them. So good training is really important all the way through.
I'm really interested too, as you were talking about the mental need for a horse for socialisation. How do you see that sort of playing out? I saw Vin's obviously been taking a lot of notes. We see people from race clubs all around Australia taking notes as well. I mean, the boxers, the situation, whether it be at any of our race courses in Australia or in Hong Kong or Japan or Korea or anywhere, to actually allow them to have that touch, as you're talking about, with their noses rather than just seeing each other. How do you see, are people really sort of interested in what you're saying and actually taking steps to really help horses to get that socialisation within racing?
Yes, I came from that place myself too. As a competitive rider, I'd box horses in sort of not necessarily isolated because they could see the others beside it, but I never really gave it a moment's thought. And it's only as I started to look at the literature on isolation and compare it to the human literature, which is really similar, that I started to think about it and experiment with it and suggest that people give it a try. And the way it can play out is, I think it's really important the horses can be alone as well as have the choice to touch each other. And therefore, even having there's all sorts of architectural designs, but you can give them, you can slide open the bars and close them again, or have a permanent opening. I think we're much more afraid of it than we should be. I think the benefits are greater from all of the research and literature than we ever give credit for.
And just quickly, as far as the foraging as well and being able to, they're naturally grazing, a large part of the day. How do you see that working within racing and after racing as well in different places where people may not have open grazing, or how can it work in practice?
Well, it's really just the act of chewing. It's not necessarily getting anything inside them or, really limited amounts. So it doesn't need to impinge even on their racing career, I don't think. It's just the fact that they've got something to do. So people have invented food balls where they've got to roll it around the stable and something falls out every 15 minutes and that keeps them going. It's just those acts. It's been shown that if you give horses access to that, some really good studies from Utrecht in the Netherlands show that if horses are provided with this when they're first stabled, that really diminishes oral stereotypies such as wind sucking, crib biting.
Quite fascinating, isn't it? Well, I'm
So
sure there's a
there's
lot more
lots
we
of
could
ways.
ask, but we'd better move on. And Kazuma Tomoto, great to have you here as an Olympian. And of course, in eventing yourself, what's your thought about the potential of retired thoroughbreds in elite competition, but also just generally?
Thanks, Caroline. I'm very happy here. I'm very happy to be here today, and also I'm very, very, very nervous rather than Tokyo Olympics Games. So thoroughbreds are required to race at their young ages, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years old, and they are raised from the time they are foals very carefully with a lot of humans' involvement, so that they can run fast or run together with the other horses and be controllable. So I feel they actually have a great relationships with humans. But on the other hand, because they are raised with a goal to win at racing, run faster, moving quickly, and sometimes they are not being very good at staying. Still some of their characteristics. However, I often feel their smartness and their high athletics potential, which suggests that with appropriate retraining system or environment, so they can show a very high capability as an equestrian horse.
They certainly have that brain, the sensitivity and the athleticism, as you say, and obviously with those thoughts in mind, how are you looking to be involved with retired racehorses in the future within your own equestrian pursuits?
Yeah, I currently work at JRA, which is an organizer of racing. And the JRA is putting effort in promoting equestrian sports too. And the Japanese racing community respect the activities conducted by IFAR during the last several years, is giving more serious thought to retired racehorses. So now my dream as a JRA employee, with my experience competing at Tokyo Olympics, is to compete at world-class eventing competition with retired racehorses. I very much believe it will be great support for the equestrian and racing community in Japan.
Well, all the best with that. Look forward to seeing you at the Olympics, hopefully with an ex-racehorse or a thoroughbred, and all the best. Yes, no, that's been really, really interesting to hear from you. Amanda Ross, I thought that's a good segue into what you understand with the thoroughbred, and in terms of someone such as Chrissy Harris with Thoroughbred Sport Horse, we'll talk about the more that we see thoroughbreds coming into sporting competitions or junior sort of homes or people that aren't competing at the elite level, it really does help elite riders such as yourself to be able to spot the better horses coming through, which again then drives, I guess, more demand. So it's quite a cyclical thing, isn't it? You can spot more of them because there are more of them being competed with.
Look, I think it's really important that we give thoroughbreds their own special space out competing. So I began eventing, and all those years ago, thoroughbreds were the only horse that you would touch as an eventer. And as a gold medal Olympic country, we've done really well with that. But if you look forward now, we've got the crossbreed warm bloods that are excelling in the dressage and the show jumping. And not every rider wants to be an eventing rider. So we really need to look for a category where the thoroughbred can showcase its specialness and not be wiped out by the warm bloods. So I'm at the moment really focusing on competing my off the track in the show jumping and dressage in the off the track classes. And from what I've seen from those competitions, there is a huge community that's growing. And it's people that don't have the money to go and buy the expensive warm blood, or they've had a special connection with a thoroughbred, whether they raced it or owned it on the track, or they just love that particular horse. And everybody is so excited to see that there is a category for that thoroughbred to be successful. And I think there's two things we're looking at. One is to incentivise people to want to buy a thoroughbred. And the second one is to educate people on, from my point of view, I know about equestrian, but if I don't work in the racing industry, I might get my thoroughbred, bring him home, put him in a 10-acre paddock, put a bridle on with a noseband, and then expect him to stand by the mounting block. And if you've been in the racing industry, you know that's not going to go well.
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? And, you know, we've spoken before as far as what the racing industry needs to know. You know, you talked about, by the way, the off-the-track horse you're talking about is by none other than the great Frankel. So all the best with that horse. But you've talked about, in terms of what the racing industry, whether it be trainers, whether it be someone coming to show you or you going to see their retired thoroughbred, what do you think the racing people trying to move that horse on need to know to help you to want to take on that horse?
That's such a good question. And I recently had this experience where I went to go and have a look at two horses, and the first one had raced on the Wednesday and I went on the Sunday, and he had been in a yard since then and he wasn't worked. And he was completely off his trolley. Now, I felt really sorry for that horse because I didn't get to see him at his best, and I wasn't in a position to put myself on that particular horse because there also wasn't a safe, flat place to ride. And I asked the trainer, and they're great trainers, lovely people, said, do you have a flat sort of arena facility? And they said, well, no. The second horse came out, and much more to my liking, quiet temperament. I was happy to hop on this one, but I had to ride it on the side of a hill. And I was in a track pad, which, mind you, was pretty comfy, but I don't know whether every person going to try that horse is going to feel confident in a track pad on the side of a hill. So I would love to see all the racing facilities with a really big flat arena, and to encourage every trainer and every racehorse to have some flat work training. So I can go to that facility, I can try it on the arena, it's fenced off, it's safe for both the rider and the horse, and if there's some poles or some jumping facilities, at least then I feel like I can give that horse the best assessment that it deserves.
And it's about also, I guess, in the way these horses are trained by the trainers. You know, as we've heard about the stop and the go, and that they take 200 metres to pull up, and they have to learn to do it in 20 metres. As far as we see a lot of horses in pre-training doing dressage and doing some, figures of 8 and those things. What would you be suggesting to racehorse trainers and pre-trainers and people breaking them in to help you with your job, or anybody taking on the horses once they retire?
Well, those two things that you've just suggested. So firstly, I have known Andrew for a long time and am a huge fan of his work and have used it in the training of my horses. So definitely getting the horse to be to understand what we expect from them in their new life as well. They know what they've done in racing, but it's a little different for their next life. And secondly, that flat work is really, really important. The horse learns to turn both ways. He learns to respond to aids. He doesn't just run from the leg. And it means that we can get so much more of a good assessment. But I think it also means the horse is a lot calmer and quieter, and they just don't know one thing that's been hardwired all its life.
And I guess there is also the issue that a lot of people think they'll ride thoroughbreds, then they'll go to a warm blood, and that's the elite horse. How do you change that perception?
I'm trying to right now. So my Frankel 7-year-old is quite an exceptional show jumper, and I've always had thoroughbreds. When I started working with Victoria Racing Club, I realised what a great community of people we have and what a need there is to showcase the thoroughbred. I do think that we need to look at them at all levels. So I personally love competing at a high level, and I would love to have a thoroughbred up there to show what they can do. But I also think we need to offer competitions and incentives to the thoroughbreds that are just coming off the track as well. So there are people out there that don't have the higher aspirations, but if we can make sure that there's something for everybody along the line, I think all thoroughbreds will be supported.
Well, Jess Bott, welcome along. Great to have you here down from Sydney. And tell us about OAR, or Owners After Racing. It's a great concept, trying to encourage owners to really take responsibility once the horse is out of training.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I'm super excited to be here. I'm a little bit embarrassed after hearing you and Tim earlier and realized while I'm really proud of OAR, I need to do a much better job about showing what it is. So I'm going to take that away and I'm going to be much better about showing what OAR is. But it is Own After Racing, and we try to encourage our owners to stay in a syndicate, much like they do if they're in a racehorse syndicate. And that horse, or there's a few of them actually, are put with professional show jumping trainers, and then we take the owners on that journey and they come to the shows and experience that as well. So it's selfish on my part because I'm joining both the worlds that I'm quite passionate about, but a few of those horses have now been rehomed from our program and are competing in the junior ring, so quite proud of that.
Oh, it's fantastic because so many horses obviously going through Gay and Adrian's stable every year, and we see a lot of owners really taking to it, whether it be Linda Huddy with Peachester Lodge in Queensland, or, Deb Kapitas is really passionate. There are a lot of owners that can absolutely sell it. And I know myself with my little retired horses doing a little bit of show jumping, it's as exciting as watching them win on the track, isn't it?
It's just as much as exciting, and I think it's also interesting that people don't know that that's out there. Like if they're from the racing world, much the same as what you were saying, if you're from your world and you don't know about racing. So it's exciting to see those two worlds merge, and I think they need each other.
And the racing world needs to know more about the equestrian world too. I think that's another big thing, I guess, for people in the equestrian world to really explain, as we were talking about with Amanda, what they really want from the horses.
Yeah, I think so, and I think we're actually starting to see that, which is really exciting. So many of the sport horse people now becoming pre-trainers themselves, and I think that that's working in a really positive way, even outside the box, making rehoming horses easier because they're having some of those fundamental basics instilled in them at the pre-trainers, and then vice versa. I know Adrian saw a huge difference using a certain pre-trainer in even the fitness levels of the horses coming off, and they didn't even have a track. They're just going up and down hills, working in a dressage arena, and he was amazed in the strike rate of those horses coming off of that particular farm, and then how many races they were able to win because of that lower level fitness that they put into them there. So it's interesting.
It is fascinating, isn't it? And you've, of course, won a number of classes. You enjoyed riding in Chrissy Harris's thoroughbred sport horse competitions. And that's the other thing too, isn't it? The incentive for people taking on the thoroughbreds, with the reward coming from some great sponsors from the racing and breeding industry. But tell us the thrill you get when you win. The rugs, they're beautiful, there's prize money, the whole thing about winning those classes on a thoroughbred.
Yeah, and I think that's what Chrissy has done very well and put that into action, and money talks, and a lot of people now are going and sourcing these thoroughbreds to just be able to be in that class because you're winning more money in these thoroughbred classes than you are on the warm bloods. So I think it's a huge initiative, but yet for me personally, I'm very competitive and I'm very lucky. My little horse off from Racing New South Wales, she's a lot better than I am, a little bit of a superstar, but
you go all right.
she does the work. She does the work.
Oh no, that's fantastic. Thanks, Jess. And I guess that's the same within. I get every, as we heard with Kim Duffy with Queensland, and every sort of jurisdiction trying to put more prize money into off-track competition. And Andrew, just one other quick little thing before we wrap up this panel too. I was going to ask, and Amanda as well, in terms of, from a racing point of view, and this has been discussed at IFAR conferences before, a lot of trainers or owners might say, look, let's just get one last start or another campaign out of a horse. It's something to be conscious of, isn't it, to try and keep a horse from really getting to the point where there's too much wear and tear for it to really successfully transition and be a competition horse?
Yes, I'll go first. I do think that's true. I think if once the racing industry realises that there is a huge potential for horses to have a great life afterwards, it might also mean that they won't be so hard done by. And the reason I say that is because I grew up on King Island, and King Island's actually been quite famous lately because it's its racing carnival over the summer. It's had a lot of airplay from racing.com. And racing on King Island was always the horse that was flogged all around the country, and it ended up on King Island. And, you know, I remember one racehorse, one race commentator called Joe Collins, who died a long time ago, and I was just a kid, but he said the hardest race he ever had to call in Australia was a 2-horse race on King Island, where the first horse won by 60 lengths and the second one, and he had to keep calling the second one home to keep the locals happy. That sort of, I remember some of those horses, and they were pretty broken, and I think having another career and emphasising the importance of it, and also what people have been talking about here in the various jurisdictions in racing, ensuring that the horse is traceable and has a good life afterwards. I think that's a really valuable thing.
And Amanda, you'd see it too, the difference in a sound horse coming to you as opposed, they're all going to have niggles. They are athletes, obviously. They're elite athletes if they are racing. But trying to address that and keep that to a minimum is so important.
Well, if a racehorse retires at 5, it can have more than 10 years in its new career. And I know with the event horses, like a human triathlete, that's a lot of work that they take to get to elite levels. So we need to have them in as good a condition, as sound as possible. And look, the reality is that there are certain injuries that won't suit the elite level, but with good management, and if the trainers and owners are really honest about the management of that horse, and they can give the new owner like the blueprint of how the horse has been managed, including all of the veterinary things, then it gives the new owner a chance to be able to put the horse into the right type of career that will suit its body.
All right, well, fascinating. We could keep talking with these guys all afternoon, but I know everybody does have to move on. Would you please thank Kazuma Tomoto, Jess Bott. Been a long day, hasn't it? Jess Bott, thank you. Amanda Ross, and also Andrew McLean. Thank you.